Hi, I'm Stuart Clark, the Managing Director of Russell & Russell.
And I'm Yvonne Webb of Action Coach Business Coaching. And together we are your co-hosts and sponsors of Glasgow Business Stories. We hope you're loving Glasgow Business Stories. So if you are, please do us a favour and subscribe. New episodes drop every 2 weeks, and we want you to hear all the wonderful stories from the businesses here in Glasgow. So please subscribe now. Neil, welcome to Glasgow Business Stories. Thanks for joining us today.
That's a pleasure.
So let's just start off by you telling us who you are and what you do.
So my name's Neil Drain. I am an optometrist, and I currently have a Specsavers franchise in Kirkintilloch and another one in Bishopbriggs in Glasgow, and that's where I spend my days.
Okay. And how did you get into that? Did you always want to be an optometrist?
I was good at science at school, and my grandfather was an optometrist, so it was put into my head. But when I went to do the course, I wasn't particularly keen on being an optometrist. I was going to try it and see how it was. But that was the late 80s, and in Scotland at that time, there was a lot of graduate unemployment after the Thatcher years, or during the Thatcher years. The industrial had been hit in the mid-80s, but the late 80s was a lot of graduate unemployment. And when I was talking to other people who were of my age, they were saying that they were going to do a 4-year course and there was no jobs at the end of it. And everybody doing optometry was saying, no, there's still jobs at the end of it for optometry. So that was very motivating to stick in with the course. And I enjoyed it. And as I went through the course, it became less academic and more about clinical, and I really enjoyed the clinical aspect of it. So when I graduated, I was very happy, and then spent a couple of years up in Dundee doing what you call your pre-reg year, which is before you qualify as an optician. You do a year under supervision, and so I did that up in Dundee and then qualified in early 1994 as a fully qualified optometrist.
And did you go into employment after that, or did you start your own business?
Yeah, I briefly worked with Dolan and Aitchison. So if you're old enough to remember them, they were a big company at the time. And then I moved down to the old Pollock Centre in Glasgow, where Silverburn is now. And I worked there for a sort of small independent group called Visions. And I worked there for about a year. And then my grandfather, who had a practice in West Nile Street in Glasgow, retired and said, you know, if you want to take on this small business, it's yours. And so at the age of 25, I'm 25 actually, I was 24 when I took it on, 24 when I took it on. I got the keys to a shop with sort of 2 years optical experience as being an optician and no business experience whatsoever.
And had that been the plan that you kind of said, I want to pass this on to you?
Yeah, it'd been the plan, and I'd looked at various different options as to whether I wanted to, because I considered staying up in Dundee, and then there was a lot of options and different franchises that were opening up at that time. There was a company called Opto, and lots of other small companies that were all vying for sort of supremacy around the sort of Scotland and the UK. And I just, you couldn't choose who was going to be the best and who was going to, you know, who's going to make the right choice. And I just thought, no, I'll try the independent route and see how it goes.
But you hadn't actually worked with your grandfather, is that right?
No, never worked in the practice at all. So I was coming in essentially blind, if you excuse the pun. But obviously my grandfather, it was his name that was above it, so my name, Drain, as well, meant there was a lot of goodwill from the patients and I think he'd been telling his patients about me for the last 5 years when I started studying, so they all were aware that this young whippersnapper was coming in, and they would still be looked after by a Drain optician, as it were.
And did you know that?
I think, and yes, I knew he'd been sort of telling people that was his hope. So I kind of knew that, and it was a decision as to whether to do that or do something else. And I think it was too good an opportunity to not try, and we'll see how it went.
So 24, 25, a little bit of work experience, no experience of running your own business. Tell us about those first couple of years. What went well? What didn't go so well?
It was absolutely hilarious. We went my grandfather retired in the July, and I think we had a weekend to sort the shop out. So I've got no life experience either. I've don't have a home or dealt with any tradesmen or anything like that at all. And we went in, and my grandfather used to have a box at the side of the test room chair, and that was where you chose your glasses from. So immediately I wanted, right, I'm going to get some frames up on the wall and frame bars up, and we'll get my equipment in that I want. I'd managed to source equipment from all sorts of places. I went down to a hospital in Liverpool to buy a pulsar, a little puffy air test machine. I got it was a lockup down there. I managed to get a lab equipment and various other bits and pieces from advertisements and trade papers and things like that. But we went in and we ripped up the carpet and put a new carpet down and put tables and chairs out and put the frame bars up on the wall. And I remember we were trying to work out the electrical system in the store, and it was like, right, that's plugged in there into this extension cable, and then it went to the next extension cable, and so there's 4 or 5, and then kept on tracing things back downstairs, and there was a little mezzanine upstairs, and eventually we had one cable that went up the stairs, and everything in the whole shop was run from one plug, but it wasn't even a proper plug, it was an old round pin plug. And I was just like, oh my God, what have I got here? And we had to continue running that way for about 6 months. And then 6 months later, I'd arranged a business loan to refurbish the shop. And a friend I'd made in Dundee was a young architect, and he was trying to set up his own business, and he designed this tiny shop that I had that was only 3 meters wide by about 5 meters. And you need 3 meters to have a test room, so the test room was the full width of the shop. And he designed this fabulous design for this shop. So we got it all refurbished, and it looked absolutely fantastic. We stripped it right back to the floor and the ceiling. Which was a mistake, because I remember it was a lath and plaster ceiling, and I remember the guy sort of looking at it and pushing it, going, but I didn't say anything. And we opened up the store, and it looked absolutely brilliant. And a week later, the lath and plaster ceiling came down on top of us, and the whole shop was just filthy. And if that wasn't bad enough, that was my first mistake as far as not knowing anything about business is concerned, because when you insure a property, it doesn't matter what you've bought your optical equipment for or anything like that, it's how much it costs to replace it with new. So I had bought my slit lamp for £1,000, but a new slit lamp's £3,000. And when they came round to assess the claim, they said you're underinsured by 2/3, and so I only got 2/3 of the claim, 1/3 of the claim paid back to me. So I'd lost 2/3 of what my claim would be, because I hadn't insured to the right amount, because I didn't realise. I just put in what the value of the equipment was, not the value of to replace it new.
So you've not made that mistake again then,
Never
have you?
made that mistake again. So we got the place cleaned up a bit, but it never quite looked the same, and it was very disappointing that. But the business grew very, very well in the first couple of years. It sort of doubled its turnover, and it started to look like a nice wee funky store rather than something that was from the 1950s, which is what it was previously.
And did your grandfather just let you run with it, or did he come in?
Yeah, he literally went in his retirement, went away in his caravan, and he would cover when I was on holiday, but essentially just left me to it, which was great, but quite scary as well. And then about a couple of years after that, I started working part-time in my grandfather's store, because it wasn't a full-time store, and I kept my original job in the Pollock Centre in Glasgow. I worked there 2.5 days a week, or 2 days a week, I think. And the gentleman that owned that, a guy called Tony Kilner, who's still as a businessman in Glasgow, he had a practice in Castlemilk, and he couldn't get an optician to go into it, and basically the store had been closed for a couple of months, And he sort of tried to sell me, and I wasn't interested. And then he sort of said, look, if you take it on with the rent arrears, you can have it. And so that gave me a full-time job between the two practices. And so I had a practice in West Nile Street and practice in Bishopbriggs, and I just used to dot between the two, just used to drive around at lunchtime, so I could offer tests most days. And again, a little bit of a disaster. We got I'm beginning to believe I'm cursed actually. We got the signage replaced before we opened up. And on the first day we opened up with all this new signage, drain opticians, and there was a double door out into the sort of main concourse of the Bray Shopping Centre, and it was a really, really windy day, and the sign just went flying across the street. So we're like, oh my goodness. So we run out and pick the sign up and drag it back into the practice. And we can't get it in the door, so we open up the other door, which we'd never opened up before. We opened up one side, and it wasn't attached properly with the hinges, and it had smashed. It fell and smashed. So I'm standing there with a sign that's split in two, and the door that is smashed on there, and there's glass everywhere. And this person comes round with this balloon and card saying good luck from my wife, and I'm standing in this carnage, and I just went, where were you half an hour ago? So that was a bit of a disaster, but we got through that. I was just laughing at that point after having had the West Nile Street debacle after it being refurbished, but we got there and worked away for a good 6 years, building up the practices, and they did well at that time, but one of the problems of being inexperienced is that the landlords were renegotiating the rents, and they were telling us this is your new rent, and I was totally unaware. It sounds very stupid nowadays, but totally unaware you could negotiate a rent review. So when they said your new rent is this, I thought, oh, that's not very good. Instead of going in with a professional who'd looked at the other rents nearby and got a more sensible fee. So my rent pretty much doubled in both West Nile Street and in Castlemilk after about 4 or 5 years, and that really squeezed the profits quite a bit, as you can imagine. And then, sort of as a last gasp, I'd been nosing around trying to find another practice, and a property came up in Bearsden, which didn't have a lot of optometrists there in it at that time. So I took that on. I think it would 2021. I opened up a store in 2001, should I say. Opened up the store in Bishopbriggs, this one in Bearsden, and I didn't really have the financial backing behind it from the business. And when push came to shove, it was losing money. It needed 2 or 3 years to build up, and I didn't have that behind me. And Optical Express at that point were acquiring a lot of businesses, and I sort of approached David Molesdale, and he basically made me an offer that cleared my debts and gave me a job with Optical Express. So I got out of being independent and became an employee of Optical Express. So I managed from the age of 24 to about 31 to have my own practices, and made loads of mistakes, but it was an incredible amount of experience I garnered from that.
And was it just you in the business for those, or did you have a team? Were you taking on absolutely everything, the admin, the finance, the marketing?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was just me. There was no team, and there was no way to network in those days that there is now. You didn't. There was no none of these podcasts or YouTube videos to show you how to run a business. You could probably get a book out of the library, but that was about it. It was just talking to other people and other businesses that you knew that would maybe point you in the right direction. But essentially it was myself, and I employed sort of managers and staff and such like. But it was, as far as, and I would send my accounts, every year to the accountant, and he would come back and say, you've made this amount or you've not made this amount. And you would just judge how you were doing in the business by what your takings were and how much money was there at the end of the month. It was very much sort of almost like cash driven, rather than not the sort of structural planning that you would like.
And how was it going back to being an employee after having run your own business?
It was a relief, to be honest with you, initially. It was good to work in a team where I wasn't the boss, because I was still only 30 at this point, and it was very good clinically for me, because I wasn't that experienced an optometrist when I took on my grandfather's business, and in an independent, you're the only person who's working in that business, so you're not learning from your peers. So it was really good that way to be amongst other optometrists and sharpen up my skills and become a better optician and use newer equipment and better equipment and be introduced into things like laser surgery and for eyes and things like that. So it was good in that way, but it once you've been your own boss,
hard to go back.
You can't go back properly. And it was good for me at that point. I got a good salary negotiated, and we had a young family at that time, and my wife was on maternity leave and going to reduced hours. So like everybody else, we were mortgage poor, and there was no money. So it was nice to have that regular income. And during that period of time, you can't really beat getting a wage and having that guaranteed money. It's all very good if your business is doing well, but when the mortgage needs paid and it's struggling, it's a lot of pressure. So I actually felt relief at that point. But as you get into it year on year, it starts to, you stagnate. There was a big pickup the first 18 months, I would say, that I felt I was really getting something out of it. But after that, it very much felt like I was stagnating. And then about 2007, I sort of decided to go back out on my own, but just as a locum. So I'd be self-employed as a locum. I felt I could earn more money, and there was plenty of work there, and it would give me the freedom to do what I wanted. And that was great as well, because you're going around all different practices, and you're seeing all the good things and the bad things that these practices do, and you can sort of cherry pick what you like and what you don't like. And I worked in some great practices, worked in some terrible practices, but they were all different. Even within, and seeing how companies like Vision Express worked and Boots worked as well was really good, and Specsavers as well. So that was a good experience to just broaden my knowledge of what the whole industry was like, rather than just my little bits that I'd seen.
Were you thinking about starting up your own business again at that point, or when did that?
When I sold my business, I was keen to move on to the next thing, and so I went through Specsavers partnership processes to become an accredited partner, as it were. And I had a look at a few practices, but the timing was totally wrong for me. I was totally risk averse after having had my fingers burnt, and I just sort of sat on it for a while. And I got asked about 2009. I got asked if I still wanted to be on the list, and for Specsavers, and I thought, nah, I'll just leave it on. But I nearly took my name off the list, and then in 2010, I got a text through, partial text, that said shares were for sale in Kirk, and I just was hoping it wasn't Kirkcaldy, and it was Kirkintilloch, and so that really suited me, being so close to home, and I live in Lenzie, so it was 5 minutes away, and I knew the town, and I knew the people, and I knew lots of people around here, and it seemed like a good fit.
Mm-hmm. And so tell us what the experience was like working for a franchise organisation compared to being out on your own.
It's all the rubbish that you have to deal with as an independent practitioner is taken away from you. It's absolutely fabulous in that aspect. So all your property dealings are dealt with by a massive property section. So your rent reviews are all dealt with. Your your insurances are all dealt with properly. All these mistakes that I made, your accounts are given to you monthly, which is absolutely wonderful. You got, I get an 80 to 100 page document every month, a fortnight after the end of the month, or 12 days after the end of the month, that details everything about my business, every single invoice, and every single day's trading that's come in, and where I am for the business, which is just incredibly good for planning. But the biggest difference was actually the Specsavers franchise. When you open the doors at 9 o'clock in the morning, people come in, and I've always said I can look after patients when they come in the door, but if they don't come in the door, I can't look after them. And you just open the doors and patients come in, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. Every business needs customers, and the Specsavers franchise guarantees you customers. And if you can only mess it up from there. You just don't mess it up. If they come into your store, treat them properly, treat the customer properly. Always set up my environment friendly and professional. If you do that, then you're halfway there. If you make a mistake, you own up to it, and you find that patients, when you make a mistake, it's an old adage, they're very, very loyal to you if you fix it. And so that's the big difference, was getting the patients through the door. But the Specsavers advertising machine it's amazing to see how effective it is. I mean, it is part of our culture. Anything happens and it's, should have gone to Specsavers. And
That's a great line.
It's a fantastic line that I've been a director for 15 years, and I get it said to me at least twice a day by a member of the public. And it used to grate, but initially it grates it, but after a while you realise, no, that's just fantastic. It's just superb. And you get all the social media memes where people are making these comments that have nothing to do with Specsavers. It's just free advertising, and it's absolutely wonderful. And the whole SFA thing, I know Scotland aren't doing so well just now, but we're giving out John McGinn glasses and stuff like that, and with the eyes, and having the referees being sponsored by an opticians was a stroke of genius as well. So that stuff's brilliant. So that's the thing. The biggest thing is the branding. The brand is an absolute beast, and it gets people in the door, and then you can look after them.
And were you apprehensive about taking on a new business again after?
Yeah, because the business was already there. So I'm not letting any secrets away. When Specsavers open up a new store, the initial cost for an individual isn't that much. And the business has loans that are that have to be repaid back to sort of Specsavers banking, as it were. But you get a salary, and your loans aren't that big, or your outlay isn't that big. But when you buy into an existing store, which is what I did, it's an individual transaction with the previous owner. So that means that the price that you pay, you have to fund yourself. So that's a different ball game. And at that point, again, I was risk averse still, and wasn't prepared to put my house up as collateral for a loan. So it was 2010, 2 years after the financial crash, that I was trying to get a really healthy loan, unsecured, from the banks, and that was a struggle. It took us quite a long time to get the finance in place to buy the business, which was already profitable, and under normal circumstances would make perfect sense for a bank to loan. But at that point, you couldn't get money from anybody.
And does Specsavers not have something internally for that
So
you could go and say, I want to buy another franchise?
So what happened, that was 15, 16 years ago. And even at that point, the banks that we're dealing with had 10 years experience of dealing with Specsavers. So they were looking at us much more favourably. And And nowadays, now they've got 26 years of experience of Specsavers directors loans, where it's just money for the banks. They just get them paid off. There's no bad debt on any of them. So the relationship now that Specsavers have with the banks, they still are at arm's length. It's still, this is a relationship between you and this bank. But go to speak to these people, they've dealt with 20 in the last year. They're going to be quite happy to deal with you. No problem at all. And so when you're looking for a loan nowadays to buy a franchise, the companies that the banks that you're dealing with are familiar with the accounts, they're familiar with the model, and they'll give you a loan without too much difficulty, providing it's a sensible loan for a sensible amount. They'll look at the value of the business, and if the partner's asking for too much, they'll say, no, that's not a good business move. And you want to listen to them at that point. But usually it's like, no, that's a decent business move. You want to do that. So it's easy to get money now, but it wasn't then.
And was it easier then for the second store at Bishopbriggs then?
Well, Bishopbriggs was the second store was a new start.
Okay.
So the initial output I didn't need to get a loan for. I just funded myself. But the loan that the practice takes out is from like Specsavers, Bank of Specsavers, as it were. So that was very easy to get financed for that. And I'd had experience working with Specsavers at that point. And I knew how everything ran, I thought. And it seemed pretty straightforward, which it never is. So that was the problem with Specsavers and Bishopbriggs when I opened up, was there weren't enough people coming through the door. Despite the projections that Specsavers had made at that point we weren't matching the projections that they were looking for. So the first few years in Bishopbriggs was pretty poor, but you still get a salary from it, and your loans are kind of soft loans. They'll take whatever they can from the business, but if it's not there, they don't take the money, which is quite good. But to give them credit as well, they parachuted in a team to help us with marketing locally, and gave us some finance to back that up as well, which again, as an independent practice, you don't get that. Now, I'm quite sure if it continued, I'd have been asked to leave that store. It'd been like, this is not working out, we need another partner to come in. But they don't just do that. They say, right, okay, this isn't working. Why is it not working? Let's get a team in and do it. And then COVID happened. We were still struggling at that point, and then COVID happened, and that changed everything for Specsavers and Bishopbriggs. That period itself is a whole other story, and we can go into that. But Bishopbriggs has got thousands and thousands and thousands of private residences around it. It's just a town of houses, and all of a sudden people were working from home. So when we opened up after COVID, instead of being in Glasgow and going to the opticians in the centre of town, they were clicking off their laptop for an hour, walking down to us and getting tested by us. So our customer volume went up markedly after COVID, and it's now flying. It's now it's a small store, and we are struggling to meet the demand purely because of space in Bishopbriggs. But the joke is, it took a global pandemic to make Specsavers and Bishopbriggs profitable. But it just shows you how things can change. Well, it accelerated the process, certainly. It hugely accelerated it. We would have got there, but it might have taken another couple of years to get to the level we're at. But it was after COVID, the store just really, really, really took off. And I think that's working from home, I think, was one of the main things.
And will you look for bigger premises, or?
We'll try and not look for bigger premises. It's very, very expensive to relocate a Specsavers because of the standards they have in their shop fitting and in their kitting out of stores. And they protect the brand, which is quite right. So they get the best tradesmen, they get the best designers, and the stores always look fantastic. But it is very expensive to do that. So we're trying to work smarter rather than getting new premises. So my optometrists are now, instead of working 5 days a week, 9 to 5, they're working 9 days a fortnight. And we're opening up to 7:30 on 2 days a week. So that allows for an extra, 16 tests a week. I'm myself and my business partner, because I have a business partner in Bishopbriggs. We're both optometrists, and we're coming in at lunchtimes during the day, and we'll do 4 tests between the 2 lunch hours of the optometrist. So that's another 8. So you're looking then at, that's another 22. So that's like an extra 2 days work we've got just by being a wee bit smarter with our clinical use. So we're working down that route. And we have an office in the store which is the size of a test room. They're very smart Specsavers. This is what you pay them the money for. The fees is that the office is the exact dimensions of a sight test room. So we would be possibly looking to get a remote office, if the IT supports it, and then open up a third test room. Although there doesn't seem to be the space for it, that would be the way to do rather than relocate. And it's not easy to get properties of a decent size in Bishopbriggs. It's a busy wee centre, central area.
And I know your Kirkintilloch store well because I'm a customer. And it seems to be really busy in terms of team. How big a team have you got now between the two sites?
So Kirkintilloch is probably about 28 and Bishopbriggs I think about 15. A lot of these people are, the way we work nowadays, a lot of them are part-time. We do take on students as well, although we tend to take on students who are studying to be optometrists or dispensing opticians. We don't take on students per se. And the idea is that we develop our own staff from within. Our Saturday staff end up being our optometrists of the future, and we've done that. We've got I'm trying to think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 optometrists have started working with us on Saturdays, who are currently employed within the businesses. They come in as students. We give them a Saturday job and let them experience what it's like to work in a practice. So it actually lets them know whether they like it or not. And then when they're going through their college course, we support them. When they finish their college course, we offer them pre-reg positions, which they can be difficult to get. When they're going through the pre-reg, again, the benefit of being in a franchise is that the franchise runs courses for them where they get to meet all their peers, and it's run by examiners and people who know what they're doing. So the backup they get through that year is again fantastic. And again, it's like, if you treat your patients well, then they'll be loyal, and if you fulfill the promises you've made, if you come and work for us on a Saturday, you'll get a job. We'll give you a pre-reg and we'll give you a job afterwards, and we fulfill the promises of that, and they've stayed with us. So that's really a fabulous thing that we've been able to do, and they've been very loyal, which is great, because optometrists are difficult to get and they're not cheap.
And how do you build the culture? Because it seems like a really friendly place. They all seem to get on. It just feels like a kind of little family when I visit your stores.
That's all about recruitment. And we can. I was lucky that the staff that I did have, although it was very, very small, 3 of the staff who were there when I took on the business 15 years ago, 4 of the staff, sorry, I should say, 1 is retired, but the rest of them are still with us. And so I was lucky that I had those to start with. And then you'd make mistakes as you go, but you learn from these mistakes. And it's all about, we can train anybody to help you choose your frames and to advise you on the right lenses and stuff like that. It's not difficult. What you can't train somebody to do is have a conversation with somebody, and those soft skills that are, people are coming in, they're agitated, they've got busy lives, and having somebody that comes in, hi, how you doing, rather than what are you here for? It's just like, hi, how are you? Disarms, calms people down, and just being relaxed and confident. And we can train people to have the technical ability, but what we look for when we're interviewing is attitude and ability to speak to people. That's the single best thing. We spend our whole days, whether an optometrist or an optical assistant, everybody spends their whole days talking to people. And so if you don't like dealing with people, you shouldn't be in the business. And so that's what we look for when we recruit. Sometimes we don't get it right. We've been better at realising when we're making mistakes and better at recruiting as time's going on. Sometimes you pick somebody up and you get the feeling quite quickly that it's not going to work out. And so you have a probation period and you just say, look, this isn't worked out. And you always feel bad when you do that, but you're probably doing them a favour as well, because they're not going to enjoy their job. So you build that culture up over a period of time, and I have to give credit to my manager, Leslie, who has consistently rebuilt the team with us, and between the two of us set the tone as to how the practice works in Kirkintilloch. And then again in Bishopbriggs, when we opened up, we had a manager in place, and that fell through. And we had a dispensing optician who's a qualified to really expert in lenses, and we asked her to take the role on, and reluctantly she took the role on, and it was a mistake by us and for her, because it wasn't her skill set, and that caused a lot of problems with the staff initially in Bishopbriggs. And we should never have asked her to do that role. We didn't have anybody else, so she filled in. But that was a rotten thing for us to do. And she left the business and is now doing the role that she was supposed to be employed in my business. And when I've met her, she's happy as Larry. And it was, so these are the mistakes that you make when you're forced into a corner. We were forced into a corner, and we've now got again a manager in Bishopbriggs who is less qualified than the first manager technically, but has that empathy with staff but authority to look after them, and sets the tone right. And now in Bishopbriggs store, we have at least as good a team and sort of tone in the store, so that when patients come in, and I think that cost us a lot in the early days as well, that the tone wasn't right when patients were coming through. There was a anxiety in the air. So it's just a matter of choosing the right people, and then checking up on them, making sure they're okay, having regular one-to-ones with them, with the managers, finding out the little things that annoy them. We seem to again have gone back to being a place where the staff want to come into work, and where the patients want to come. But it is a cyclical thing. You have to keep doing it again and again and again. It's not something you just do and that's a magic wand and that's it fixed. It has to be revisited.
You talked about learning from your mistakes. So if you go back to the first business, what learnings did you take from that you brought into the new franchise?
I think the main learnings, there's a lot of technical stuff that came in that Specsavers helped with. Let's say all the marketing, all the things like GDPR and record keeping and things like that Specsavers have got great computer systems for, and IT systems at the backup. So a lot of the stuff that I made mistakes from because it was just too much to deal with are taken away by being in the franchise. And that's the huge benefit of being in a franchise, is it allows you to concentrate on working on the business, not in the business. You can decide, all right, okay, I think we're a little bit tight for staff. Do we need more staff? And you can look at the figures very easily and you can see whether you need more staff or not. So that's good. I think so. Most of the mistakes I made were along those lines previously. So that's actually been removed from me. But I think the learnings, I think the biggest thing is been looking at the staff. I think the staff are the biggest problems, and if you speak to any business with a number of staff, they're the biggest problems, and the best thing about your team are your staff. And I think just being more experienced and seeing people who work well in practices and who don't work well in practices, with my practices with Optical Express and with locuming, allowed me to meet more people in different practices. And you do walk into practice and you go, oh, I don't want to be in here, and it's maybe one person out of the 5 people that are there that are the problem. So I think the main thing is recruiting the right staff and getting the right people would probably be the biggest thing I'd learned. Other than that, it's just the knowing what's going on in the background that Specsavers are doing, and making sure that they're doing that, and feeling confident that they're looking after me.
Do you think if you'd had, also I've got a bit of bias towards this as an accountant, but do you think if you'd had monthly management accounts in your previous business, it would have changed how you ran it? Or
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean that's absolutely fantastic. You used to just stick your finger in it. Oh, how are we doing? Not bad, And it's just, it allows you to plan. It allows you to look at where you should be investing and when you should be investing, and not be reactive. It allows you to be proactive, and having those figures and people overlooking those figures as well and giving you advice. So an example would be right now, as we speak, again, I don't think this is a commercially sensitive thing, Specsavers are really ramping up their advertising. And the reason they're doing that is it's been 6 years since COVID lockdown, and most patients are on a 2-year cycle. So there was a period where we saw no patients at all. And what we found is in 2022, April, May, June are absolutely shocking. And in 2024, or not shocking, but they were really difficult to get patients in because there's no reminder recalls going out. 2024, it was still much worse. And in 2026, again, the volumes were having to fight more. So having that overview and being proactive, we're getting communications meetings and partners meetings where they're saying, the recalls is going to drop. The number of recall messages you're going to send out is going to go down by 30% during these months. Therefore, we need to ramp up our advertising. That's invaluable to have that background, and it costs you money, but you're timing it right. You're not spending money. In my old practice, I would have got to the end of that period and went, oh, this is terrible, I need to spend some money on advertising, at a point whereby recalls going back to normal, and it would be a complete waste of money because I didn't need to spend it. So having that proactive opportunity is brilliant, and the accounts are, and all the other analytical things that are done, not just accounts, but obviously looking at patient data, and we find out you're underperforming with kids. You're not seeing enough children. Are you offering enough appointments? Is your retail area kid friendly? Is your waiting area kid friendly? Or are people with kids just not wanting to come in because it's not a nice environment to bring kids in? We all know if you've had kids, you know that there are some places you take your kids in and it's great. You can just sort of relax a little bit and it's fine. And other places the kids just aren't meant to be, that you sometimes have to go and it's terrible. And if you're set up wrongly, it gets pointed out to you. Or why is this happening? There might be something you can't fix, but it might be something that with a couple of posters and a wee coloured mat on the floor, sets a different tone and makes things better. So all these things that are worked on in the background with you, all these figures are looked at where you're overperforming, and they come to you as well. Specsavers, give them their due. What are you doing with your staff retention? Your staff retention is really good. What are you doing differently from anybody else? And you pay it forward, and you buddy up with stores that are doing better than you in one thing and worse than you in another, and you learn from each other, which is really good.
It sounds like they're a really supportive franchisor, actually, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they are. I mean, the Specsavers are a huge brand. And so they are very big on brand protection, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, because if somebody in Hemel Hempstead makes a huge mistake, then it could devastate my business. So they're very good with that. So you have to comply. So there's a lot of rules that you have to follow, but that's what you signed up for. They're not hidden from you. There's no sneakiness about it. That you have to be brand compliant, but it's quite funny, if you are brand compliant, if you're hitting your figures, and as far as growth is concerned, if you're a growing business and your customer service is good and you're brand compliant, then very rarely do you see anybody from Specsavers. Whereas if you're not, then they will come, but they come they come to help. They're sometimes more strict. No, you need to do this because you're not brand compliant and you're putting other people's business in danger. But generally they come in, as they did in Bishopbriggs, and said, this isn't working the way we want it to. These are the tools that we're going to give you to make it work better. And you can't argue with it.
So Neil, we always end the podcast by asking our guests what your guiding principle in business is. What would you say?
I think it's all about the tone that you set, I think, is the key thing. If you're in a business, business is still all about relationships. And you have a relationship with your customers, and you have a relationship with your staff, and you have a relationship with your local town. And it's all about building these relationships and looking after looking after everybody that you deal with in the way that you want to be looked after. And I think that's really often underestimated how important that is, particularly if you're a community business. And that's my guiding principle is make sure you're working in a business that you want to be working in, and you do that by having the people around you that are the best.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's been great to hear your story. Wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you.
And yep, it's been a pleasure having you on Glasgow Business Stories. Thank you.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure.